gardeners, welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be talking about some reptiles that I typically don't recommend for a majority of most people. Of course, if you are passionate, experienced, are willing to put in the research and have the resources to care for these animals, it can be a good fit for the right person. However, I feel like the majority of people just get these animals and have bad experiences or are just not prepared. So I'm hoping that talking about these species will bring some awareness and may prevent people from buying them that maybe it's not the best fit for. It doesn't mean that I don't love all of these reptiles, because I think each one is amazing in its own way. So yeah, we're gonna dive right into it. The first reptile that I don't recommend to people typically, really to anyone, is the crocodile skink. And I don't know if they're still as popular as they used to be. I feel like years ago they were just like all the hype, everyone wanted one, and it's understandable why, because they look like little dragons. They are one of the coolest looking reptiles ever. They also have really cute faces and orange around the eyes, and it makes them look like toothless, and people that were into How to Train Your Dragon really got into this species as well, just because it looks so much like that dragon. And I mean, who doesn't want to keep a little mini dragon in their household? Like, anyone would want that, and that's why they became so popular. The reason why I don't recommend them for people is because people that may not do the research or know much about this species other than it's super cool looking, they may just have higher expectations of what they're going to get out of this animal when they're keeping it in captivity. For instance, they may assume they're going to see the animal a lot, at the very least, and be able to handle it and, you know, have a relationship with it similar to how we do with other reptile species. However, this species in particular is very skittish and prone to stress, and not as easily trusting as other species. So it results in an animal that will be hiding a majority of the time, and it's kind of upsetting because they do require a really cool enclosure setup. A lot of people add like a water area, live plants to increase that humidity, a fog machine. It looks like such an amazing atmosphere, but then the animal is going to be hiding all the time, and you're not going to see it that often. And if you do and it sees you, it may run away. So I feel like that is kind of a letdown, and people aren't going to get what they want out of it. And because of all of that, they're also just not the best with handling because they're terrified all the time. Of course, like if you really work with one, it does depend on the individual animal, because every animal has its own personality. But generally speaking, this is not really a handleable animal. It's going to be something that is more of a viewing animal, but then again, you won't get to view it that much either because it's going to be hiding all of the time. So just because of these reasons, I don't recommend it, because I just feel like people that are keeping reptiles, they do it because they really want to see the animal all the time, observe it, handle it, have a relationship with it. And this is a species that I feel like is going to be a little bit of a letdown in that department. But if you are very passionate and you are willing to take whatever you can get of seeing this animal and want it, then I think it would be a wonderful fit for you. So I just don't want people to be disappointed when they get something like this and then, you know, they don't get what they want out of it. They're also very delicate and fragile. They do require a lot of attention to detail when it comes to setting up the environment for them. So that also, you have to be a little bit advanced and have some experience or a lot of knowledge and research to go into making sure you can create the proper habitat for one. So it definitely makes it not so much as a beginner lizard for someone to get. So yeah, for all of these reasons, I think that they are really cool little lizards. It's amazing that they even exist. And I just don't think that they would be a good fit for a majority of people, just because they're a little bit more challenging and people are not going to get a relationship that they would expect out of them so much. So yeah, I just don't typically recommend them. The second animal that I typically don't recommend mainly for people getting into the hobby that don't really have that much experience, would be chameleons. And you guys know I love chameleons. They have a very special place in my heart. I find keeping them so rewarding, and I don't think I can have my life without a chameleon in my life. Like I need at least one because they are so special. But they are not for everyone. And unfortunately, like, everyone knows what a chameleon is. Even people that are not into reptiles, they know how cool they are. They have the roaming eyes, they have the colorful bodies, they move slowly. Like, they are just very, very cool, unique. They have the shooting tongue. Like, they have things that no other reptile has, and they're very popular for it. But that popularity makes people just want to get them spontaneously, not really knowing much about them, and this is absolutely not a species you can do that with. Chameleons have a lot of downfalls, unfortunately. Even though they have so many highs, there are many lows to keeping them as well. Some of them are that they are just very fragile and delicate to keep. They require a lot of attention to detail, more so than some other reptiles that are more hardy and easier to take care of. They need a specific environment. They do not drink from water bowls. You need to make sure that they are properly hydrated through misting and drip systems. They need a good balance between airflow and humidity, which are two opposite things. So that in itself can be very challenging to try and balance when you want to make sure that there's proper ventilation and airflow, but you also want to make sure there's enough moisture in the air, but you don't want there to be too much moisture that they can lead to bacterial issues, and then you don't want there to be too much dryness because then your reptile will be dehydrated. So it is not something that most people are willing to deal with or have any idea how to even deal with. So a lot of chameleons end up suffering and getting improper care just because they are so fragile, and they do require that passion and attention to detail that not everyone is able to give. Another downfall to chameleons is that they have such short lifespans, and personally that is the biggest downfall for me because I've kept many chameleons now, and losing chameleons is very, very difficult and awful. It's very hard to go through over and over again, which is why I don't have multiple chameleons anymore, because it's just so hard when you lose them. So yeah, it could be a better fit for someone that doesn't want like a long-term commitment, because a lot of reptiles have very long lifespans, but chameleons are one of those that just have the shorter lifespans, especially if you get a female. So yeah, it's just something to be aware of. Then another thing about chameleons, I know you guys see pictures of me holding my chameleons all the time and, you know, interacting with them. However, it does take a lot of time and patience in order to have that relationship with a chameleon to where you can handle it. And sometimes it doesn't happen because chameleons are very prone to stress. They're very stressed out little creatures, and they typically are not the best for handling. So you may not have much of a handling relationship with your chameleon, and you shouldn't have that expectation that this is going to be an animal that you can handle all of the time, because it's not going to be good for your chameleon and it's going to cause stress. So that's another thing. I feel like most people want them because they're cool. They want to show them off, you know, and this is not the type of species to do that. If you want more of a handling animal, a bearded dragon or a blue-tongued skink would be a better option. But chameleons, because of those stress levels and how fragile they are, it is best to just have them more as a viewing animal. So for all of these reasons, I think that they can be perfect pets for the right people, but I don't think they are a fit for a majority of people. Number 3 is the Sculcata tortoise. I feel like this is pretty obvious, but you know, it's not obvious for people that aren't familiar with the species, and this happens all of the time, which is why it's on my list. Because whenever you go to like pet stores or you know, like reptile shows, you will commonly see the tiniest, cutest baby tortoises, and they're typically called Sculcata tortoises. And the issue is that they are so small as babies, People do not expect that they are going to get over 100 pounds and be multiple feet long and huge. And that is where the issue comes in. They are a huge commitment. They can most likely live past your lifespan. So it's going to be an animal that like your grandchild will probably end up with. And they get huge. So seeing a tiny little tortoise is so many people see that and they're like, I can take care of that. That's going to be fine. And they just don't know like the long-term commitment that a sulcata is. So that's why it's so important to constantly bring awareness to it. And that is why it's on my list, because I'm constantly going to be trying to bring awareness to that, because it's so sad when the tortoises end up getting rehomed or abandoned. And, you know, we don't want to see that. Or tortoises that are just not getting proper care. Another thing with sulcata tortoises, and honestly, it's kind of a lot of tortoise species, they are very destructive. And people would not expect it. But they really, really are. They are strong. They can dig into things. They can knock things over. When you have a sulcata tortoise, it just brings it to like the next level. And they can like damage walls in your home. Like I've heard horror stories of like what these tortoises can get into. So if you do have an adult one, you really need to make sure that you are able to give it, you know, obviously enough space, but you want to make sure it's secure as well and not something that they can just demolish, because they will most likely try. So they are just a lot of work. I think they would be a dream species for me. If I had like a giant yard, I would love to have a sulcata tortoise. That would just be amazing. But for like, you know, most people, it's just an unrealistic animal to have long term, and it's going to end up being a lot of work. Number 4, another animal I typically don't recommend for obvious reasons, is the tokay gecko. Tokay geckos are another species that is so popular. They're very cheap. You can easily find them pretty much anywhere. And again, it's just one of those species that most people that aren't familiar with reptiles, but they want one, they see this animal and they see how beautiful it is and they want to get it. And I've seen it happen firsthand. I saw it happen at a reptile show. I saw this girl and she had a little tokay gecko in a container. And I was like, oh wow, it's so pretty. She's like, yeah, isn't it pretty? My boyfriend got it. And I was like, yeah, but they're so feisty, you know? And she had no idea what I was talking about. And I'm like, oh no. People have no idea. That's why it's so important to do research before you get animals. But the tokay gecko in particular are like the pit bulls of like the gecko society. They are very strong. They have strong jaws. They have sharp teeth, and they have a lot of attitude. And they can be worked with. I have seen it is possible to like tame down a tokay gecko, but that process is not easy, and it is not for everyone, and the bites are very nasty. And having an animal like that when you're unaware of how difficult it can be to manage, it can be very difficult, and it can make it difficult for you to properly care for that animal. So that ends up not being a good outcome, and then it results in the animal not getting everything it needs or rehomed, you know, all the things you don't want to see. So I think that they are not a good fit for a majority of people. So it is not something that I would recommend to most people. But if you are super into tokay geckos, you are passionate about them, and the people that love tokay geckos love tokay geckos, like they're very passionate about it, and those are the people that I think is the perfect fit for tokay geckos. But yeah, most people are just not on that level. And the last species that we are going to talk about today is what got me into the entire reptile hobby, and probably like my favorite animal in the world. I just have such a connection to them, and it is the pond turtle. Specifically speaking, more so the common red-eared slider or the yellow-bellied slider. These turtles are so common, and you can see them at lakes all around you. If you're in the United States, they're everywhere. But then if you are going to, like, you know, a pet store, or like even Petco has them, and, you know, any other reptile store, or if you're going to a reptile show, These turtles are everywhere. There are so many of them, and they are super tiny little babies. Again, turtles, the babies are always so tiny and you never expect how big they're gonna get, and that's another situation, unfortunately, with mainly red-eared sliders. These turtles unfortunately are abandoned the most, I feel like, in the reptile hobby compared to any other species, and for so many reasons that I would not recommend them to most people. One being that these turtles do start out small, however, they get very large. They can get up to a foot. It's like a dinner plate or even a little larger. That's a big animal. And what makes it more difficult to keep is the fact that they need a full-on swimming area, which most people do with tanks, but honestly, tanks, it doesn't even seem sufficient. Like if you had an entire pond, that would make more sense for this type of species. But most people get them and put them in like smaller tanks, and it's not suitable. It's not big enough for any of the sliders. Another thing is that they do require UVB and heat and a basking area. So not only do they need all of this water, but they need an entire basking area where they can dry off and get all of that UVB as well. Unfortunately, it seems a lot of people don't do research. There are so many turtles that end up with metabolic bone disease and shell issues and just so many health issues because they're not getting the proper things that they need. And it's just overwhelming for people that don't know about any of this. And yeah, so they end up not getting cared for properly. They get sick, they get rehomed, they get abandoned, and it is just a giant mess. And another thing, you don't want to be leaving these turtles, like if you're like, oh, this isn't working for me, people just bring them to ponds because they see the same species there and they just dump them. And the issue with that is the turtle, depending on how long you've had it, there's a good chance it's not going to survive because it doesn't know how to find food on its own. It's expecting a human to come to the tank and put food in for it. So it's not going to survive in the wild if it's never experienced having to go into a brumation phase and then it's plopped somewhere and it has to experience winter for the first time. That can be a huge shock to the turtle as well. And then another thing is that, especially with red-eared sliders, they can be pretty invasive. It can really mess up the ecosystem of that pond when you're adding another animal to it like that. So it is never a good idea to do that, and if you do have to rehome, the best thing to do is try to find a good home for the animal or bring it to a shelter or someone that deals with turtles. You know, there's so many rescues. There's so many rescues for turtles. I would love to have my own rescue for turtles one day because they have such a special place in my heart. They're what got me into reptile keeping in the first place. But, you know, there's so many of them in places like that because they're not good fits for people, and they're also another long-term animal. They do live a very long life, and they require so much maintenance, especially with a tank full of water. It gets very dirty. Pond turtles are dirty animals, and yeah, it requires a lot of maintenance, and it's so much work that people are not expecting when they see a cute little turtle and they're like, I'm just gonna bring this home. So yeah, they end up being not a good fit for a majority of people. I think that my turtle is probably like the more challenging animal of all of the ones that I keep as well, just because of that tank. It drives me nuts, but I still love them, and they just are not for everyone. So it's not something I would recommend for other people. So yeah, I hope that this video helped to bring some awareness to these species, and I'm curious if you keep any and what you think, and I'm curious what animals you think you wouldn't recommend to people that you think are not a good fit for a majority of people. I would love to see what you guys have to say. Thank you for being here today, and I will see you guys in the next one.